Hi, everyone. I'd like to do a shout out to our sponsor, Bako Diagnostics. Early detection is the single most important factor in improving patient outcomes. The Bako Diagnostics team recognizes how impactful a podiatric physician can be and remains committed to supporting you in your role as the first line of defense in diagnosing conditions of the lower extremity. Thanks to the unwavering support of their clients, Bako Diagnostics has been able to give back to the podiatric community for 16 years by providing podiatric educational resources and advocating for the position. Bako Diagnostics, helping podiatric physicians keep America on its feet. If you have not yet had the opportunity to utilize Bako Diagnostics services, get started today by sending an email to corporaterelations@bakoddiagnostics.com. The first 50 podiatry offices who request a starter kit will receive a Dean's Chat mug. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Zachery Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. Once again, I am joined by my co-host, Dr. Jensen and Richey. How are you doing, Joe?
I'm doing awesome, Jeff. How are you doing?
Doing great. I'm in Florida, anticipating getting back to Arizona. Life is good. How's your weekend?
Weekend was good. It's absolutely gorgeous weather-wise right now. So this is the time of year that we live for.
Fantastic. Well, we have just a tremendous interview today. Joe and I are joined by two of our fourth-year students from the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine. I'd like to introduce Mattie Krause and Zachery Goguen to Dean's Chat. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Welcome. You know, Zach, we go back. You interviewed me for Dean's Chat about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, that's right. I remember it fondly.
No,
I wish I had my Dean's Chat mug with me right now.
Oh, Joe's got hers, so we're in business. So I want to kind of set the stage for this discussion. About, I guess it was 3 weeks ago, we had a meeting with the current third year, soon to be fourth year students, and we were discussing clerkships, and we were discussing upcoming boards in January of next year. We were discussing residency interviews, which usually occur with programs where you do your clerkships, which is a month-long process. And I thought, and during that time, Mattie and Zachery joined us, and you acted like faculty, and it was outstanding. And I just thought it'd be a wonderful opportunity for our audience and our listeners and those that are watching on YouTube to kind of get that same experience from you, what it was like in your fourth year. You're only a couple months now away from graduation. In about a month now, we'll have the actual match, so you'll know where you're going for a residency program if you don't have a pretty good idea already. So there's a lot to talk about, but I thought maybe where we'd start is your fourth-year students at the Arizona College. Mattie, you're from where I grew up in Wisconsin. You went to the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. Zachery, you're from Arizona. You went to Arizona State. Maybe each of you could talk about your undergraduate experience and how you found out about podiatric medicine, and then how you decided on the Arizona College. Mattie, would you mind going first?
Sure. So my exposure to podiatry actually started before undergrad. I was 16 when I had bilateral bunionectomies and bone spur removal. And so I got early exposure and ended up shadowing the surgeon that did it, Dr. Dawson at Gunderson in La Crosse, and stayed very interested in it throughout undergrad. I majored in medicine and then ended up coming down to Arizona. I was interested in the strong academic program. I really liked the aspect of being combined with the DO students. And I was excited to kind of experience a different part of the country. And obviously the weather was a great draw as well.
And that's a common theme, all of those, the DOs and the integration, and of course the academics, and the weather in Arizona is usually pretty outstanding. Zachery, how about your experience? I know you're a local, but how'd you find out about podiatry? How'd your undergraduate opportunities present themselves? And then why'd you decide on the Arizona College?
Yeah, so like you said, I went to Arizona State, majored in biological sciences. I was pre-med, didn't know what route I was going to take yet. During that time, I met my now wife, and her father is a podiatrist in the area as well, Dr. John Charsky. So through him, I ended up meeting and shadowing Dr. David Armstrong, who is also a former guest of yours on here, and also gives a wonderful talk to our, I believe, our second year students each year. And I saw what he was doing, the work he was doing with diabetic patients and limb salvage, and I just fell in love with it. And I thought, this is for me. So being an Arizona local, after finding out about Midwestern University and the podiatry program, there really wasn't any other option for me. I also ended up doing the master's program at Midwestern the year previous to starting podiatry school, which I couldn't recommend enough for other students who are interested in that as well, because it really prepared me for the rigors of school as well. Here I am now, 4 years later.
That's incredible. Joe, every year, about September of the third year, students start to kind of lay the foundation for what their fourth year is going to look like. And you and I are always counseling students on clerkships and preparing for the fourth year. Maybe as a kind of getting into the discussion on the fourth year, what do you tell students when in their third year is preparing for fourth year coming up?
Yeah, I think one of the best things is it's never really too early to start. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have it all figured out, but starting to ask the question, or I had a first year in here who was just needing a little inspiration to get through what I call Black January, right? It's just rough that first year going through all that basic science and coming in and starting to have some of those conversations about different places you can go in the country and different little maybe areas that you could focus on if there are certain things that you're really interested in. And so I don't think it's ever bad to start having some of those conversations even early on, if nothing else is just keeping you connected. But then as it starts to roll into their second and third year, it's hard to know sometimes that you want to focus in a specific area. So then starting to ask all the other questions that kind of go into play. And I kind of look at it in terms of there are geographic opportunities. And now we have so many amazing training programs across the country. It's not like, oh, you have to go to this place, this place, this place. You can really get really fantastic training in so many parts of the United States that you don't have to minimize it to just one area. You can travel across the country. But if there are places, if you're bringing people with you on this journey, having them being a part of it, there may be areas that they want to be closer to family, or certain areas that they just gravitate towards. And it's such a wonderful opportunity to take 1 month of your life and experience a city and a training program and kind of put yourself in it and say, is this where I want to be? Is this where would I want to live in this city and go to this program every single day for 3 years? And that's actually what I would really love to kind of then throw the ball back to our students and get kind of what that experience from that granular level really felt like for you. And Mattie, we'll start with you.
Sure. It is one of the coolest experiences I think I've ever had, just a year of completely new experiences and learning while you're traveling. I wasn't set on a specific geographical location, so I went all over. I did 2 programs in Florida. I went to New Jersey, to Boston, Wisconsin, Illinois, and then Texas for 2 months as well. And I just want to say one of the other cool things that I didn't realize until I was a student here at Midwestern is how many clerkships our program allows us to do. You can do 8 to 9 different clerkships. And so I think that's a very cool advantage we have here, because you get to really explore a bunch of different programs.
Mattie, when you first looked at the daunting task of signing up for clerkships and applying for the various opportunities, how did you lay that out? What was your thought process? You were at that time, you were in the second quarter of your third year.
Sure. Yeah. So I think Midwestern, our college, offers different programs to come in, and they'll give us talks about their residencies. I think that's a great opportunity to hear, and find out if you think that'll be a good fit. I also think we have alumni all over the country, and so seeing where they go and talking to them was also another great way to kind of feel everything out and see where you want to go. And then, of course, if you do have geographical ties, you can check out those locations as well.
Very good. Zachery, how did it look for you going into clerkships? How did you make some decisions on where you were going to go and what that route would look like in your fourth year?
Yeah, so I think it all kind of started. I think I went to you, Dr. Jensen, actually, sometime in my first year, just to get an idea of, some well-known programs that you've been aware of in your time in the profession. So I think that was a good starting place. From there, sometime in third year, yeah, with the residency fair, with different programs coming and speaking to us, it was good to meet some of the current residents or attendings that came to our school to visit and just hear a little bit more about their program from them directly. And then from there, it was really talking with my upperclassmen as well, who were at that point almost finished with their clerkship rotations. So they very kindly shared a document that showed where all of their rotations were. So I went through there, found who was at programs I was possibly interested in, talked to them, emailed them, texted them, got their feedback, what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it. Also at the same time, kind of taking it with a grain of salt because everyone's experience is a little bit different. Everyone's looking for different things in a program as well. So just kind of feeling that out. And yeah, with that, I think I managed to complete a pretty solid list by the end of it.
Can you give us the geographical tour? What states did you go to?
Yeah, so my wife and I are both from Arizona, but we were both totally open to going elsewhere in the country for a period of time, and maybe we'll come back to Arizona afterwards. So we went all over, started in DC, went to Denver, Seattle, Tacoma area, Central Michigan and Saginaw, Boston, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, and then finished up in San Antonio.
So you both went all over the country and there wasn't a lot of overlap. To your point, Joe, there's so many opportunities. Not everybody's looking for the same thing at the same time in the same place.
And I'd love to get your take on the logistics of some of that. Again, as a student, as an early student, second year, trying to figure out, oh my gosh, how am I going to set up housing? How am I going to get from Denver to Wisconsin? How did you guys go about figuring out the logistical details? We'll start with Zach and we'll go back to Matt. We'll go the opposite this time.
Yeah, so it was a little bit unique for me. My wife, she has a job that she has to go to in person, so she stayed home back in our house with our pets as well. So for me, I would find an Airbnb most of the time. I know there are other options like rotating room that a lot of other students use as well. And I tried to stay on top of that, book those out a couple months in advance, so that way I made sure I knew where I was going to be for that month. And then for me personally, I drove my car. I think I put on probably about 40,000 miles on my car in that year, driving across the entire country. And, a lot of these rotations typically require you to have a car regardless. So it was nice having my stuff, packing my life for the next month in my car each month. But yeah, it was a challenge. It was fun. It was great being in all these different places and, being able to live in a new city each month. But yeah, it is definitely a challenge.
How about you, Mattie?
So I tried to plan it at least group them geographically. So I drove from Arizona to Florida, did both rotations in Florida together. Then I went up to the Northeast, did my 2 up there. Then I drove to the Midwest, did my 2 there, and then down to Texas and did the 2 there. So obviously you can't always try to do that, but if you can, not having to drive back and forth, I think it definitely helps. I traveled with my dog solo. And so we were getting Airbnbs, and then also 3 of my programs happen to offer housing. And so that's a very cool thing. And when students are looking to sign up for clerkships, you can read the different amenities that they include, and some of them include that. So definitely great to take advantage when it's possible.
Oh, that's great.
Did either of you do any housing through the programs?
I did. I did for the 3 months, yes.
Yeah.
I did not.
Did you like it?
My programs did not offer it. So.
Okay.
So
Was it a good experience, Mattie?
Yeah, it was great. And with clerkships in general, you're meeting students from all over the country. And so in those situations, you also become, roommates or hallmates. So it's kind of just another cool opportunity to socialize with other students.
Awesome.
I was wondering if you could each share kind of what a clerkship feels like. You get into a new city, you're getting into a new housing situation. What do those 4 weeks typically look like? I know it's a broad stroke with a paintbrush, but just curious to give first or second year student an idea of the clerkship experience, how would you explain it, Mattie?
So every program's a little different, but you're going to have your core fundamentals of clinic time, hospital time, surgery time, academics. And then depending on the program, might be heavier in academics, heavier in surgery, vice versa. And so, excuse me. So the great thing is you get there and in all my experiences, residents attending, super nice, super understanding, that this is a new place. So they're going to help show you around and kind of set the expectations for that month, whether it's, you're prepping the OR or, you're supposed to present journal articles every week. And so you'll be told and kind of shown what the expectations are. And then during that month, it's really your opportunity to see what life would be like to an extent as a resident if you would go there. And then also just explore the city when you have time on the weekends and just really kind of test it out as an on-the-job interview.
Well said. Zach, can you add to that?
Yeah, I think Mattie kind of really outlined that really well. It is, well, what I like to do is I always like to make sure that I arrived in a new city with at least a full day before starting. That way I could get settled in, maybe go out and drive around the city, drive to the hospital, see what my route is going to look like each day as well. Just kind of prepare myself for the upcoming month because it is nerve-wracking. Even, towards the end of the year after you've done it 7, 8 times, you're still, the new guy at the hospital at the beginning of that first week. But yeah, like Mattie said, everyone is always so great and gracious. All the residents and all the attendings that we work with have all been there, and at some point in their past, right, they all went through the same clerkship experience, so they totally understand, what it's like to start at a new hospital each month. And yeah, so each month is a little bit different. But it's by the end of the month, you're getting to know everyone really well. You're starting to make new friends. You're starting to meet other students from other schools and, get to know them a little bit more. And so by the end of the month, you end up with probably 10 or 15 extra contacts in your phone.
Well, that makes sense. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, and it's such a fun time, and it's also stressful because, as you had mentioned, it's like a month-long interview. Were there ever any awkward situations socially, or I'll give an example and then you can tell me if you ran into any of these, and then maybe some tips for students on how do you navigate the awkward, because awkwardness just happens, right? So let's say you're scrubbed into the OR and the resident is talking your ear off, right? And you're trying to stay focused, the attending is there. What do you do? Like, this is stuff that we'll get these questions from students. So did either of you run into maybe that situation, or any other kind of awkward, and you don't have to say names or anything, but how do you manage some of those awkward social interactions? Mattie, we'll put you on the spot first.
Okay. I don't know if I had that one specifically, but I think for me, I was definitely super eager in the beginning. And so I was always trying to anticipate and follow people places and make sure I was, trying to be one step ahead. And sometimes that meant I would follow residents and then they'll turn around and be like, oh, I'm just going to the bathroom. You don't have to follow me. So, like awkward things, like you said, are going to happen. But I think just be flexible, try to just read the room, be socially cognitive of different environments and ready to adapt. And I think just over communication is better than under communication. And so if you feel awkward about something or you're nervous, just let the residents know, ask for further clarification. And I think that helps mitigate any of that awkwardness as much as possible.
Excellent advice. How about you, Zach?
Yeah, well put, Mattie. I don't think I had that exact situation either, although I do think one month I had a fellow student who was very talkative when we were trying to learn, but I think at that point it's kind of trying to redirect them so that we can both be learning as well, or try to ask a question to get back onto topic. But yeah, it's an inevitability that awkward moments like that are going to happen. And yeah, I think Mattie said it great, being flexible, but also being aware of what your expectations are as well is just something to keep in mind. If you don't know, ask. If you're not sure where you're supposed to be a certain day, perhaps, I don't know, there was a mix up in the schedule. It's always better to ask a resident, ask the chief resident, than to assume at that point.
That's great advice. How about when you gauge the course of a month, you start somewhere and then you get to the end of that fourth week, how are you getting feedback from the clerkships? Were they giving you an exit interview? Were they giving you literally like a mock interview? Were you giving presentations that you may have put together during that month? How did that look typically over the course of the year, Zachery?
Yeah, I think most programs will have you do a final presentation as a student, either an individual presentation or a group presentation I had to do once or twice as well. And that's where you're working with the other students who are there to create usually a bit of a longer, more in-depth presentation to present to all of the residents and most of the attendings at their weekly academics. Most programs also do a mock interview, usually with just the residents. So it's a little less intimidating, still intimidating for sure, because you're still there and, having to answer some academic and some social questions, but it is really great preparation. Most of the time, it's very indicative of what their actual interview is going to be like. I personally like to ask the director for an exit interview just to get some direct feedback from them. Wasn't always granted it, just based on their time or their policies at their program, but for the ones that did do an exit interview with me as well, that's really a time that I got some direct feedback from the director himself or herself. But usually throughout the end of that last week of the month, by then you've already gotten some good feedback from the residents and the attendings, and they're kind of letting you know what you're doing well, maybe some areas that you can improve in. So yeah.
Very good. Mattie.
I agree with everything Zach said. And I think the other thing that programs told me was that they're not necessarily looking for you to know everything, especially early on, but they want to see you grow throughout your month. And so for me, about 2 weeks in, sometimes after the first week, after the third week, I would ask the residents or the attendings, like I'd check in and be like, so how are things going for me? Like, what do you think I should work on the rest of the time I'm here? And so that way I can, try to be cognizant of what I'm doing. And so I'm not waiting till that exit interview in case there are things I could improve on earlier in the month.
Very good. Say, before we move on and talk about preparing for residency interviews and boards, I thought maybe I'd give a shout out to our sponsor, Bako Diagnostics. We all know that early detection is the most important determination in improving patient outcomes. Bako Diagnostics remains committed to supporting you in your role as the first line of defense in diagnosing lower extremity pathologies. Bako Diagnostics, helping podiatric physicians keep America on its feet. We always love to give a shout out to Bako because they do so much for our profession, whether it's students, residents, their attendings. You had the Bako lab, right? That Dr. Shear came in 2 summers ago.
Yeah, he came in and showed us, gave a lecture on different types of biopsies, excisional, incisional. Then he he did a lab with us where we worked with some pigskin, some oranges, using the different tools. And the first time I had the opportunity to do a punch biopsy, I knew how to do it, kind of very specifically because of that lab. So that was great.
Yeah, kudos to Dr. Shear. He flies in the middle of summer. He gets pig's feet, and he shows up in the lab to teach, and it's like 110 outside in August or something. So kudos to Bako. Anyway, back to the interview. You want to discuss preparing for resident interviews? I don't know how much you had to prepare, but you also had boards at that time, so you were kind of like, but they both kind of covered each other. But I thought it would be interesting to talk about the residency interviews, the actual interviews themselves. Sometimes you're interviewing with programs that you did not do clerkship at. Many times you are interviewing with programs where you were a clerk, so it's a different dynamic a little bit. Do you each mind just sharing your experiences with the residency experience? Zachery, you can go first.
Yeah, so just so everyone knows, for future students or current students, boards and interview are both in January. That does sometimes changes, but this year boards was the Monday of the week in January. Interviews were starting later on that week. Studying for boards, I think, prepared me a lot for interviews. Just in general, you're getting all that knowledge that you need for boards, and most of that knowledge is what you're going to need for your interviews as well. So honestly, I think having the board exam right immediately prior to the interviews helped a ton. Now, specifically preparing for the interviews, there are a bunch of resources out there. One that I used a lot was called Pre-Pod Study. They will go through a bunch of different cases. There are some practice questions. They also have a list of social questions, and looking for any resources like that is going to be helpful as well. I also prepared and ran through some mock cases with some of my classmates as well. Just we would take turns with each other. I'd say, hey, I'm really weak in, say, ankle fractures. Let's run through an ankle fracture case together, and they'll act as the interviewee and, run through some x-rays, ask me to work up a patient, ask me any question they could think of in regards to an ankle fracture. And then afterwards, we kind of work through what maybe I got wrong, what I did well on, and maybe we both didn't know a question too. So we, use that time to look it up together. So that helped a lot. And then honestly, by the time, once you're on the interviews, once you get done with the first one, get those jitters out of the way. A lot of the interviews are structured similarly, where it's usually an academic portion where you'll run through a case, maybe answer some rapid fire questions, and then a social session as well, where they'll ask you more about yourself. What did you like about the program? What did you like about the area? And yeah, it's just, it's great to see everyone again from throughout the year. A lot of the students that I rotated with, all the residents and attendings. And so by the end of the weekend, you're kind of mentally exhausted after laying it all out there, but it's still a good experience. I enjoyed it.
It's a great overview. Mattie, what was your experience like?
Similar for sure. I think resources like Crozier, Prism, Watkins, which we use for boards, are also useful for interviews. And like Zach said, I think it's super important to practice talking out loud. I think the first 3 years of school, a lot of it, we're used to just multiple choice, and the answer is going to be in front of us. We got to find it. In interviews, that's not the case. So you have to, be able to recall things without specific cues like that. But being pimped, which is being asked questions while you're out on externships by the attendings and the residents, is great practice all year long. And then on top of it, some interviews, they'll have you do hand skills like suturing or hand ties. I had to reenact it, some gaits in one of them. So there's a lot of different things to be prepared for. But again, your whole year and our whole journey through school is preparing you for it. So everybody will be great.
That makes sense. Joe, your thoughts on residency interviews?
I love what Mattie just said there about how she feels like the curriculum had really kind of prepared you for that, but that there are some distinct differences between being a student in those first 2.5 years and being a student in that last 1.5 years. I'd love to get both of your take on how did you bridge that gap? So try, if you can, remember what it was like to be a third year. So we just had our third years back on campus for their CBE, or their competency-based exams. And so I got to pick all of their brains about what it's like to be on clinical rotations right now. But I know the audience would love to hear, going from classroom, buzzword, multiple choice questions, right, to here's a real patient in front of you. Take all that clinical knowledge you have and apply it. What was that experience like? And do you have any tips for the audience on how to bridge those gaps, or what you did? And we'll start with you, Mattie, for this one.
Sure. So I think at our school, during the beginning of our third year, we do 4 or 5 months in Arizona. I think that's awesome practice because these are local attendings. They know that you're just starting, but it's going to give you that in-office, OR experience that you'll then take to clerkships. And I think also at our school, we go to different community hospitals, even first and second year. And so any experience like that is going to help, and just being patient with yourself and allowing yourself grace to know that it's going to be a challenge, but everybody goes through this, and that you just keep applying what you've learned.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, 100% agree with all of that. I definitely think that the clinical rotations we do in the area beforehand helped a lot, because that was usually with doctors that we've already worked with, or maybe have come to our school to lecture, do a guest lecture for something. So you kind of already know them. It's a more comfortable environment. But I think also just being okay, I think, with saying, I don't know, but I will look that up, especially when you're asked certain questions, goes a long way. And then actually following through with that and taking the time to read, taking the time to try to find an answer. Even if you don't find the answer, reading something and then coming back and having a conversation with that attending or that resident that asked you that question is huge, and they love that. They're not always going to ask you to recall that information, so it kind of becomes onto you to take that upon yourself to do that reading. Yeah, I think I read so much more than I thought I would, but then also at the end of the day, being okay with asking questions as well. If you don't know something, that's totally fine, and being willing to ask, why are we doing this? Why are they presenting this way? Why, why are we looking for this lab value? I think they may sometimes turn it on you and say, oh, that's a great question. Why don't you go read into it? And that's okay. And most of the time they'll just tell you and they'll go through it. So I think being able to show your interest also goes a really long way if you don't know the answer.
Fair. So I have a comment and a question. My comment is, obviously your class did great. We had a 96.5% first time take pass rate for your class, which from a didactic perspective, you are all tremendous. One of the questions I had though, so much of that interview process is social and fit and how you respond to criticism and feedback. Can you share with our audience some of the interesting questions that you might have had in the social aspect of the interview? Because that, there's some typical ones, but I think your take on it, fresh off the experiences, would be really a neat story. So Zachery, if you don't mind sharing some of the social aspects of the interviews.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I got all the typical ones. Tell us about yourself. What did you, do with your month while you were out here? One that I liked being asked was, tell me about an interesting case that you saw. And that was kind of challenging for some places too, because especially if you talk about a case that maybe you saw at a different program that was interesting that you didn't see at their program. I had a program then bring up a case in the academic portion that was, oh, okay, well, actually, let's talk about a case about that. So it's kind of interesting because they wanted to hear, why did you like that case? What was so interesting about that case, to kind of see, what kind of medicine or what type of procedures you're interested in pursuing, but then also, okay, let's, talk about it academically as well. So I thought that was an interesting challenge, and very, very, it was an interesting case.
Did you get asked that specific question? What is your biggest weakness?
I got asked that not many. I'd say, yeah, at least half the time for sure. And I practiced that question a lot leading into it.
What recommendations would you give future students coming into, because that's a big question, right?
Mm-hmm.
You try to take a negative and turn into a positive. And what'd you say?
Yeah, I mean, so I generally prepared 3 responses in case they wanted to know, what are multiple weaknesses. For me, I was pretty honest about it. One, I don't like to ask for help all the time. So that, can be a challenge, especially if you're trying to maintain a large workload. And through the first couple of years of school, taking on leadership roles at the school, I was finding it a challenge to really do it all on my own. So being able to ask for help, learning to ask for help is something that was ongoing. Second one, I was fairly candid, and I said, I'm can be a bit of a procrastinator, but I generally find the time I get everything I need to have done. Sometimes it's down to the wire. And I got a great response from one of the attendings. He had a quote in response to that. He said, I forget who the quote was from, but he said, nothing would ever get done without a deadline. So I was like, that's a good point.
So did they ask you what your biggest strength is?
Yeah, exactly. They gave me the exact converse of it as well. Biggest strengths, I've said, I'm a self-starter. I'm a first-generation college grad, first-generation college student, first-generation professional student. So while I definitely had, some help along the way, it still was a challenge to navigate, and I did have to learn how to do all of that on my own. Another strength of mine was just curiosity. I love learning new things. I'm constantly going on the internet, look just about anything that I see around me. If I don't know about it, I'm going to learn about it. So I thought that was a good strength as well.
Zachary, I wasn't meaning to put you on the spot. I was trying to illustrate the need for students when they get asked those questions to have an answer. When someone asks you, what's your greatest strength? You can't sit there and say, huh, never thought about that. You got to have an answer for it. And so well done. Mattie, how about the social interviews for you? How did those go? Things you might have expected and didn't get, or vice versa. And then if you don't mind, I'll ask you the strengths and weaknesses question too.
Sure. Yeah. So I had some fun ones, like if you had a superpower, what would it be? If you were an animal, what would you be? They also do some ethical questions, like if you see, an attending doing something they shouldn't do, what do you do? One of my favorite ones is what I would bring to the program. I think that's cool because a lot of times we're so focused on, what we're going to gain by going to residency there, like what's their numbers and, what's their different focuses, but they're also we're trying to sell ourselves to them. So, bringing up research background or the different, strengths that we have is a good way to answer that question. For me, for a weakness, I thought about it for a while too. I have a tendency to overthink things, overanalyze things. And I think sometimes that can make you second guess, you have the right answer and then you change it. And so sometimes just, going with your gut, being confident in yourself and it's just a progress of working through that. And then my strengths, I said I was resilient, I'm very passionate, and very hardworking. Coming from rural Wisconsin, a farming family, I think that's something I carry with me. So I like to tie that in.
I think that's fantastic. Thank you. I didn't mean to put you both on the spot, but that's fabulous
I'm
answer.
still in interview mode right now.
Yeah.
I don't want. Well, I feel
They
one of the
handled that beautifully.
They did. Well, one of the reasons I feel comfortable asking you that is I knew you'd have great answers. So thank you. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, having sat on the other side of interviews, the one that was always interesting to me to watch students struggle with is tell us about yourself. And it's awkward to talk about yourself in like a 30-second snippet or a 1 minute, like having two different versions prepared. Because sometimes it's like in 1 minute or less, tell us about yourself. Or it's like, give us a quick synopsis of yourself. And if you really haven't practiced that, it's really weird to talk about yourself. So it was always very clear students that had either had an interview already, so they had to work it out at some point, or that they had practiced that. When you guys were putting those together, did you work on that either with each other, not you two necessarily, but like with other students, or did you work on that with residents, or were you caught off guard at all? If you don't mind me putting you on the spot there, we'll start with Mattie.
Yeah, so I was expecting that one. Everybody kind of tells you have an elevator pitch about yourself ready. And the great thing is I had residents at multiple different programs I went to that did mock interviews if students wanted to leading up to it. So I'd practice it. But for me, I try to hit on, a little bit about my personal background and then some things maybe that would make me unique and some interesting things that's gonna try to make you memorable, because at the end of the day, they're probably interviewing anywhere from 15 to 50 plus students. So, it's those little things you can try to add in that'll, jog their memory when they're going through everybody.
Love that. How about you, Zach?
Yeah, I got that question for sure. And I was expecting it. So I, prepared ahead of time. Just thinking about it again as well. Another question that I got that I was lucky enough to prepare, but I actually got more than I thought I would was, tell us about something that you are interested in that, or one of your hobbies that not a lot of people would know about, and kind of run us through it. So I'll spare you the details and the boring physics of disc golf, which is my hobby. But so also knowing yourself and knowing what you enjoy, I think was really big, because then a lot of times they'll ask rapid fire follow-up questions on that and see how much do you really know about it, or how well prepared, or just, is this truly a passion of yours, or is this something you're making up on the spot? So I think having that time to self-reflect, introspect, think about yourself in a truthful way, rather than just, oh, let me just, try to be the best that I possibly can be to them, goes a long way as well.
That's such a good point. It becomes very obvious when students are not being honest. And there's nothing more embarrassing on both sides. Like, it's just awkward to watch someone go through that. So, and you can't get it wrong, right? When it's about you, and maybe it's about disc golf that the people on the other side have no clue. Maybe they know a lot about it. You don't know. But if you know it, if you love it, it's easy to answer those questions without any preparation. So I think that's a really good tip.
think that's a great point also. Let's move on to boards. We've already discussed the fact that you were studying for boards and it helped you for residency, but tell us about the board experience, when you started studying, if it was the exact date or if it was just an accumulation of information over time, and then about the testing day experience, what part two is like. If you don't mind just kind of sharing your what you experienced. Mattie, if you don't mind going first.
Sure, yeah. So I started in October doing board vitals. I love board vitals. So I went through all the questions twice. I also, like I said earlier, Prism, Watkins, Crozier are your best friends. And those are things you can start while you're out on rotations. That'll just make your life easier leading up to boards. But on top of the board vitals in October, about 4 weeks leading up to it, I really just tried to spend any time I wasn't in clinic studying. That's when you're, going to do your practice tests and do, just keep reviewing, keep practicing those questions. And yeah, it was good. I think test day is similar to part one. You have a 205 questions, 4 hours. You're gonna sit in a testing center. So just it's about staying calm and trusting the education that you have.
Oh, I like that. Zachery.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think I officially, like in my mind, officially started studying for boards until sometime in maybe mid-November. But throughout that entire, 6, 7 months prior, I was reading so much in terms of Prism, Crozier, McLamory's, Watkins, just in preparation for clerkships, just to be competent on my rotations. And so many of that, I didn't realize until I really started studying legitimately for boards that I retained, and so much of it is just on board. So I definitely think that helped a lot. I was doing board vitals questions, started out, maybe 20 to 50 questions a night in the beginning, and then ramped it up towards the end there. But yeah, I think the biggest thing for me too is, like Mattie said, yeah, just trust that you know it. Take your practice exams, if you feel confident in it. Also, again, trust, don't second guess yourself when you're taking those questions. That was a big thing that I struggled with when studying for part one, especially, was I would constantly be changing the question. And of course, the correct answer was the one that I had switched from. So yeah, just trusting yourself, and then try to get a good night of sleep beforehand, because you're not going to do well on any exam if you're working on a few hours of sleep. So just, again, trust yourself, give yourself a chance to rest and relax, and then be ready to take it in the morning.
That's just great advice all around. Joe, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the sleep thing again, like the parent, right? But it's such an easy, well, it's not easy, simple. It's such a simple thing to do, to really allow your brain to be at its best. And if you need a sleep aid, then try it prior to the night before. Don't have your first night that you try a sleep aid to be the night before your board exam, but figuring out what you need to be successful on that day. I know some students, and I did this when I was a student. I had like a kind of, it sounds ridiculous, but kind of a ritual that I would do every morning, every exam morning. I did the same things in the same order, in the same way, type A, right? But like, it was the thing that helped me like get in the game. And again, if we think about our professional athletes, it's a similar kind of experience where you're trying to optimize your brain's experience, your brain's performance. So why not put yourself in the best mental capacity as possible? So whatever you need to do that. But the sleeping cannot be stated enough, because it's so easy to try to just cram it, or you're feeling really stressed and you can't sleep. But getting that good night of sleep is so important.
Well said. So I wanted to touch on one other area that I'm super proud of both of you. It's your research experience and your participation in research as a student. As a previous clerkship director at the North Colorado program, we really took seriously students that not only did they do well in the curriculum, not only were they just wonderful people to be around and to teach, but they also had that little extra where they wanted to do research. And residency programs are looking for that, right? They're looking for students that will come in and enhance their program to your comments earlier, Mattie. And I know both of you worked on a couple projects together. Do you mind talking about your research experience at the Arizona College and how did that impact perhaps your interviews or the time you spent at the various clerkships? Zachery.
Yeah, so Mattie and I actually worked on a couple projects together. My research experience at school kind of really started going back to the master's program I did the year before. I had to do project. And actually, I ended up working with Dr. Krause, who's on our faculty. And then in podiatry school, I ended up doing another case report that was presented at our annual poster presentation at our school. So that was another good way to kind of get my feet wet into the research side. And then Dr. John Sessions, who's on our faculty at our school, he does our clinical correlates, I believe, in our third year. He's great. He's from out of state, but he sent out, an offer to any student that was interested in getting more involved in research to kind of take that up. And Mattie and I actually ended up being two students that were interested in that. So we've worked on a couple of things with him, and one of them is kind of culminating into a poster that we're presenting at ACFAS this year in Phoenix. So that was a good experience as well.
Zachery, did anybody ask you about your research and interviews?
I want to say it did come up once or twice, but I think more than anything, what it showed was a willingness to go above and beyond. And I think, if anything, it did also show the programs that I was willing to put in the extra work and to add something to the program rather than just like Mattie said, what can I get out of it? And I think that impressed programs more so. And I didn't get any specific questions about my research, but I can tell that they were looking for things like that.
Fair enough. Mattie, how did that play out for you?
Sure. So I was asked almost every interview about different research projects. I have done quite a few here at Midwestern, and that's been kind of one of my favorite things. Is there's so many different faculty here that have projects that are so excited for students to get involved. So you just have to reach out, and the opportunities are really endless. I've worked with, I mean, I don't want to miss anybody, but Dr. Violand, Dr. Krause, and Dr. Krause, Dr. Jenkins, multiple community partners as well. I've gone to different national conferences. Zach and I are taking a poster, and then I have another poster going to ACFAS. We have some manuscripts that have been published and different publications pending. And for me, I think what's really cool to see, because obviously, yes, it helps you on your resume and stand out in interviews, but why I am so passionate, kind of why I fell in love with it end of second year, was realizing the public health aspect and the healthcare policies and different treatment regimen is all based on research. And so it's so cool because what you're finding out, what you're learning through your research can totally change what the protocol is for treatment for patients. And I think that is a really cool practical aspect to it.
I agree with you. It can change the experience for patients and clinicians alike, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I'm super excited about what you both participated in terms of research, and I'm super excited about watching your career and seeing how that flourishes in the research aspect also. Joe, you've got a lot of projects going on too. It's great to see the students thriving in research.
Absolutely. And I'd love to get your guys' take on one last thing too, that's piggybacking on the research. As you've had the opportunity to go and present your research at different venues and conferences, certainly we have one here on campus, but also you both mentioned some national conferences that you've gotten to go to. What have been some unique opportunities that you took away from that maybe had you not done research, you wouldn't have had otherwise? Zach, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think a big thing, just the simplest thing, is when you're standing next to your poster in the exhibit hall, just seeing the posters that are around you, and a lot of them are from residents at programs that maybe you're interested in attending. They're going to be asking you about your project. You're going to be asking them about their project, and you get to just shake a lot of hands and meet a lot of people in that regard. And when you also, I feel like when you really delve into the research side of things, you start to learn about how how medicine and how protocols are developed, and you start to understand or have a deeper understanding for you know, the lectures that you're hearing at these conferences as well. And you begin to take a little bit more out of it as a student, especially, you know, just kind of starting. A lot of it can kind of go over your head, but then also being able to take a critical eye to certain things and, you know, take that with you to like journal clubs at your clerkship rotations and presentations. Being able to critically review the literature goes a long way and shows, you know, the programs that you're interested in, that you know, you are actually interested in this and you're not just, you know, checking the boxes.
Yeah. How about you, Mattie?
The networking is huge. I think also it just helps you on your clerkships when you have to do your different presentations, because if you've already had practice presenting posters, that's a great exercise experience in that way. Also, there's scholarship opportunities, different poster competitions. And like Zach said, a lot of the people at these conferences are residents and attending. So there's not always a ton of students. So it's another great way just to get your name out there and get some experience early on.
Love it.
That is so good. Joe, should we do a couple rapid fire questions just for fun?
Oh, yes, most
All right.
definitely.
All right, I'll kick
Love
it off.
rapid fire.
I'll kick it off.
All right.
It's date night and you're going out for food. What kind of food are you going for? Mattie.
Greek food, Italian food, and then here in Arizona, Persian room. Highly
Oh,
recommend.
Oh,
all right. Zach.
Yeah,
your
typically
food of choice.
Typically it's going to be Italian food. My wife and I love Babo, which is pretty close to campus.
Oh yeah, I've eaten there a bunch. Good. Joe, your turn.
all right. Favorite place you've ever traveled? Zach, you get to go first this time.
Portugal, beautiful. Very, I didn't get to spend a lot of time there. I was just kind of passing through while I was in Spain, but close second would be Hawaii. Beautiful, absolutely paradise.
All right. How about you, Mattie?
I loved Montana, Florida, and New York City. That was fun.
Ooh, all very different too.
Something you do outside of podiatry that makes you relax, that isn't like, you know, I know you're a rock climber, Zach, and I know you like disc golf and things, but something that nobody knows about you. How's that sound?
Yeah, I love to walk my dog. If I'm home, if I have nothing to do, I will take her on several walks, many walks throughout the day. We'll just go walk around the neighborhood. It's a way to kind of just have a moment away from everything and yeah, just connect with my dog.
Mattie, what do you do to disconnect from podiatry?
Similar on the animal track, here in Phoenix, we have a lot of service and therapy animal programs, and I volunteered with, so that's been a great way to relax and give back to the community at the same time.
All right. One thing that you wish you would have known going into podiatric medical school. Mattie, you go first.
Okay. I think the individual personal growth was huge. Coming in, I was 22 years old. And so outside of academics and everything, just seeing me kind of grow up the last 4 years has been very cool.
That's awesome. How about you, Zach?
Yeah, I think honestly, I'm going to piggyback on that and I'm going to steal it, Mattie. I think it's so true. I was a little bit older coming in, so I thought I knew myself, but I did really just grow, and I feel like I, you know, kind of really blossomed into who I wanted to be in this type of profession.
Oh my gosh, those are wonderful answers. Joe, I would go for ending there. What do you think?
I think it's a beautiful place to stop.
Absolutely. Mattie and Zachery, thank you so much for joining us on Dean's Chat. Thank you for being part of the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine, and we are so looking forward to following your careers going forward. Congratulations for all you've done at this point, to this point.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you both very much.
Well, we've got an extra another Dean's Chat cup for you there, Zachery, and Mattie. We're gonna send you one, and hopefully during your residency, when you know you're gonna be working a lot, you might have to need a little caffeine or a little pick me up. You do it with the Dean's Chat cup. So there you go. All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, and to all of our listeners out there, if you're watching on Apple, listening on Apple or Spotify or watching on YouTube, please become a subscriber. Please leave some comments, and Joe and I will continue to bring the best of podiatric medicine, from students to residents to practitioners to leaders in the field. Till next week, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Cheers.